I knew from a very early age that I was different. Different to my brothers, the way my parents treated me. When I went to school, the teachers started correcting my behaviour. I realised I wasn't like my classmates. But in sport, again, they were correcting my behaviour, the wrong way of doing sport. As I got older and older and older, I realised that I was born into a world that wasn't designed by people like me, for people like me. Simply because I'm left-handed. I'm also a Capricorn. Capricorns, where are you? There we go. Best star sign? Definitely. And I'm a Saturday child. Do you remember the rhyme? I don't remember the other days of the week, but I know that Saturday child works hard for a living. Any other Saturday children? Yay. But have we got any left-handed Capricorn Saturday children apart from me in the room? I'm unique. I am the only person like me in the room. And we know that's daunting to be the only one. We've heard earlier, you can't be what you can't see. The buzzword, psychological safety. If I walk into a room as the only one, I feel that pressure, not only to represent myself, but to represent people like me. I feel like I'm being judged. I feel like I'm being held to account, always on my guard. The World Economic Forum 2022 Gender Parity Report shows that we will not achieve gender parity in the world for 132 years. Who thinks that's acceptable? Green, acceptable, red, unacceptable. 132 years. In 2020, in 2019, before COVID, that was 100 years. We've gone backwards by 32 years as a result of COVID and lockdown. Why? Women took on the brunt of responsibility in the home with education, household maintenance. Men were able to thrive in their work from home environment. Women often found they adopted more pressure. And I don't want to generalize. I know that there are many men out there who share the burden equally. But when your child falls over and cuts its knee, it's normally mummy they call for. In Europe, the stat is 60 years, which is better. It's better, it's an improvement. But in Southern Asia, it's 197 years. 197 years. Even 60 years in Europe sounds like a long time. It's probably beyond my lifetime, beyond many of ours. What if we were to halve that, 30 years? That's still too long. I don't want to wait 30 years for gender equality in the workplace, in the world. I don't want to wait till next year. So we heard the initiatives that Nadia and other organisations doing, the 19%, the 30% club. And UK now has come out in the top 5 in a recent survey as making the most positive impact on gender parity. It's in the top 5. We now have 53 female CEOs in the FTSE 500. Who thinks that's good? That means we've got 447 male CEOs. It's a start. But are we really moving the needle? 1918, the Parliament Act. Women were allowed to vote. But only some women. You had to be 30 and you had to own property. But that key phrase, women were allowed to vote. Who allowed us? Men. It took until 1928 with the second act, where voting equality came in, that brought in voting for more, wasn't about property anymore. The voting age for women was brought down to that of men, to 21. But again, who made that change? It was men. So why is it critically important to have men in the room, to hear our stories, to hear our voices? Because it is those with the privilege that can drive change. Racism is not a black problem, it's a white problem. Sexism is not a female problem, it's a male problem. Ableism isn't a disability problem, it's an ableist problem. We need to access privilege to create change. Could I ask anyone who identifies as male to hold up their paddle? Okay, as a proportion of the room, that's quite low. What I would like to see is events like this, where 90% of the people in the room are men hearing women's stories. We know our stories. We know the stories we hear. We know about sexual harassment. And yes, we hear it's not all men. But every woman I know has a story. Every woman I know has felt unsafe or uncomfortable, nervous about staying too late at a dinner or a party for fear of getting the last train home, concerned if there's a football team playing at home and having to catch the train with the football crowd. Everybody has this story about the drunk colleague who keeps trying it on. When I first gender transitioned 6 years ago, I felt like an imposter. I felt like, what did I know about feminism? I'd lived my life with my privilege, not even thinking about my impact on others. Why would I? I just got on with my thing. But when I gender transitioned, I started getting my own stories. I started listening to the voices of my female friends. I started to hear the experiences that people shared. I listened to an audiobook called Everyday Sexism by Laura Bates. If you've not listened to it, if you've read it, great, but try listening to it on Audible, because it's narrated and you hear real voices telling real stories. I listened to that book and I felt ashamed of my past because I'd never heard this before. And we all know that shame isn't a great emotion. It doesn't change the world, it doesn't bring anything forward. So I quickly moved forward from feeling from shame into action to thinking about this. So it's not just about sexism, it's intersectional. We've got to think about the impact of intersections, all women. And the reality is that women of colour, black women, brown women, suffer different sexism from that intersection. Queer women, women with disability. So when we're initiating programs in our organisations, is it for all women? Are we moving that needle forward? So when we think about how you can step up as allies, and I think women should also be allies to other women. We know that we're always good at it. We can put other women down. Lots of crabs in the bucket syndromes, super chickens, whatever analogy we want to use, pecking at each other. What do we need to do? The key for me, it starts with listening. Listening to stories. Listening to other people's experiences. Have a coffee. Meet me somewhere and have a chat. I don't want it to be creepy though. I don't want you to say, Joe, can we go and have a coffee? It's not that kind of coffee I'm talking about here. But don't treat me as your educator. It's exhausting when you're from a marginalised or minority community that I have to deal with the education. There's YouTube, lots of documentaries. If you haven't seen Davina McCall talk about the menopause, why not? If you haven't understood the challenges that women face in the world through listening to public information for YouTube, so say broadcast media, then please do that first. So when you're engaging in conversations, you're starting from a position of some knowledge. So once you've listened, then it's about taking action. What can you do? Otherwise, if you just listen, nothing happens, no change occurs. So listen to what you can do. Don't take over, don't center the problem on yourself, don't be the hero. I'm an ally, yay, fantastic, give me a medal, give me a badge and a lanyard. It's not about that. Allies should be active and visible, but not take over. Need to listen to our stories and take action. Recognize the privileges we hold. If we hold privilege, how can we use that privilege? Don't be ashamed of our privilege. Don't be ashamed of how we've lived in the past. Recognize now is a time to move on and change and take action. The next thing you can do as an active ally is speak out, or call in. So the difference between calling out and calling in. Calling in is with education. That's not great language, or that's not a great response, because this is how you could say it better. Calling out is just challenging. What happens when we challenge privilege? Privilege recoils, it puts up the defenses. What we need to do is engage with people. One of my mantras is smile, engage, and educate. I consider myself an educator, not an activist. So I recognize that people are scared to get it wrong. Just as I was scared to get it wrong 6 or 7 years ago. Didn't have the language. Develop that emotional intelligence, that EQ, that self-awareness. Be able to self-regulate, self-manage your own communication style. Work out how you can interact in social situations. Pick up those cues. Look for people who are struggling or in trouble. Then build stronger relationships. And by mixing EQ with CQ, cultural intelligence. Cultural intelligence is about becoming comfortable and competent in environments or communities that are not your own. Cultural intelligence starts with the drive, your own desire to find out more, to get involved, to understand those challenges, that listening element. Through drive, you can acquire knowledge. I've already mentioned, there's many, many thousands and millions of minutes of YouTubes and documentaries out there. There's no excuse. Books, audible books, whatever it may be. But you have to be able to make sense of that knowledge. Next part of CQ is making sense of it, developing a strategy. Don't be armed and dangerous with a little knowledge. Once you have that strategy, then you can take action. But what I don't want any ally to be is scared. It's the biggest barrier to inclusion, to change, that fear of getting it wrong. You're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to get it wrong. There's a book by Rutger Bregman called Humankind. It's a great, great book. I love his other book, Utopia for Realists. And what he says is that humans are generally kind. We start off each day positively, wanting to do good. But then it goes wrong at some point when the fire alarm goes off. So believe that people have positive intent, but also recognize with your positive intent comes a responsibility for negative impact. Be accountable for your actions, for your thoughts and deeds, and always have a plan B in your back pocket. If it goes wrong, how do you then communicate? Let me leave you with a thought. Bad things happen when good people do nothing. Be the one that does good and does something. Thank you.